almost even within institutions, there was kind of a segregation too of the women's track and the men's track. And I'm wondering, you know, what that meant or what the implications were for, you know, what did single-sex education do that was good for women? And then, say, what did breaking down some of those barriers do that was good for women?
Well, historically, we had women's only and men's only institutions because they didn't want to bring them together.
Right.
Women really didn't have a choice. So sitting as we are on the East Coast, we have a different kind of a history than if you go to the middle of the country or the West Coast. But here, so if you look where I live in Massachusetts and really down through here and even into the South, there were already colleges, but they were for men. So once you started to open the doors to women, they were going to be educated separately. Then as you moved towards the middle of the country, it became much more common to open an institution to be co-education from the beginning. But as you said, Liz, different paths for the men and women who were there. So when we got to the 1960s and the 1970s, and there really was a rejuvenated women's movement in the sense of why, if women are in these institutions because they were not allowed in the other, that I think was the impetus for opening men's only institutions to women and vice versa. I went to Connecticut College, which had been a female only institution. It went co-ed in 1970, 1969, just as many of the other institutions did. And that was because the history was a negative history. At these institutions, it was segregation because they didn't want them together. What changed for some of the institutions that decided to stay, particularly the all-female institutions, as they moved into the 1970s, the women's movement moved with it, and there was a sense of kind of claiming the power of an all-women's institution, of saying that these are places where women are valued, women's differences are honored, women's career capacities are recognized, and we got into the, if you remember Carol Gilligan and in a different voice, in the sense that women approach some things differently, they speak about some things differently. So you see an actual campaign among those institutions that remained all women to say, we are now a very good place for women to be heard, for women to become leaders. And I think that's why many, many schools have successfully stayed all female. For the men, that was what they had always been. So I think your data showed us that only 4 schools are still all male, but many, many schools, dozens, are still all female.
So I found 48 all women's colleges still, and that includes Sweetbriar, which is still open, and maybe we don't know, right? So, you know, what does AAUW see as, you know, the unique role of women's colleges today?
You know, many of our first AAUW leaders of the organization, excuse me, were also presidents of places like Sweetbriar and Barnard, and you know, and so you know they took the leadership opportunities very seriously because they understood that women's colleges played a very unique role, not only in their own education, but also in women coming forward. Throughout the years, we've had a very strong and very unique relationship with women's colleges. And so, you know, while we don't advocate, you know, one over the other, the beauty of having the choice is what I think is really important. So we understood that, you know, there are ways in which women's colleges meet the needs of women on levels that work for many women. Other women like the opportunity to have the coeducational experience. And as we've looked at things like science and technology, you know, studies have shown that women's colleges actually graduate many more successful women, you know, in the STEM fields. And so there's something about women having an opportunity to speak their minds and not always having to prove themselves, or, you know, having conversations that may at times be more authentic, being listened to more, having the opportunity to have more female role models, you know, and that's an opportunity that isn't always replicated when we're looking at coeducational institutions. And as we today fund our fellowships and grants, you know, we fund women across the spectrum of institutions because we understand that, you know, women have different needs. And without having that opportunity, I think that it would be a great loss, because there are so many, you know, successful women who look at their experience at a women's college as really the defining point of their lives as young women, and as having propelled them in ways that they don't feel that they would have been able to move forward if they had gone to a coeducational institution.